It's the Misfits.
Hey everybody, welcome back to who knows what you're listening to, because this is we're just doing this and throwing it everywhere. So, Misfits, welcome back. We're in the middle of our misconceptions mini-series. We're going to talk about the misconceptions of the season of Lent and ask our favorite question: is it pagan?
Guys, welcome back. What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Buddy Walk with Jesus. As always, as we get started, we want you guys to know two very important things: that you are prayed for and you are loved deeply. At least a third of our audience just said, "What am I listening to?"
They should know by now. Like, come on. I've been on enough. They should know by now.
Yeah, it's so it's metaphorically and literally getting into Super Bowl season for Christians here in the West. We are gearing up for Lent, and this is one of those areas that is kind of something that I have inadvertently found myself keenly interested in this period of time, namely because of what it's leading up to and all of that kind of stuff. But this is one that a lot of people seem to struggle with, and I think, like many of the conversations that we end up having, when misunderstanding is afoot, people start to ask, is it pagan? And you know, this is no different. You know, how things associated with Easter get associated with paganism is beyond me, but you know, that's never cease to be amazed.
Well, and that's part of what we can actually start with. We actually do know why this gets associated with paganism. Because like we talked about with Easter, everybody associates Easter with this idea of, oh, well, it's the same as Ishtar, and it's the same as the Issatar festival and all these other pagan things. And so the idea of a season of sacrifices, immediately then it's like, oh, well, see, they're sacrificing to Ishtar. That's what this is all about. And the reality is that none of that is true. So if you have not enough time to listen to the whole thing, know this: Easter's not pagan, Lent's not pagan, and anybody that tells you that is wrong.
There it is. That's the TLDR. But yeah, so that's and I don't know about other parts of the country, and just a fair warning to the BWC guys. Usually, as is the case when we're talking about when I'm talking with Andrew and we're talking about these kinds of things, we are talking very specifically from the Western context with today's conversation.
Yeah,
but
this is very much the entire idea of there being a problem with this. I've never seen this come up anywhere outside of a Western context, and specifically a modern Western context.
Right. So on the East Coast, you ask most people about the association with Lent with any denomination, and you're going to get Catholicism, like straight across the board. Oh, that's just a Catholic thing. That's not. Oh, so you just give up soda or chocolate for 40 days and you call it good, or it gets spun into some kind of, if it's not associated with Catholicism, it's associated with some kind of fad diet, or something along those lines. Like, oh, I'm going to give this thing up for 40 days and all of that without actually understanding what the idea is. And thus, because of that lack of understanding of what the idea is, that's how, I said tongue in cheek about the whole, I don't know how we got here sort of thing. But no, it's very firmly understood how we got here. The lack of the contextual understanding of what it is that we are doing and how we are posturing ourselves during this period of time leads to, oh, you just must be doing some kind of pagan sacrifice as a means to gain favor, as a means to appease God, as a means to do all of these things.
It's works based.
Yeah, it's a works based ideology,
and that's where a lot of the non people that will not say it's pagan but still have a problem with Christians practicing Lent is part of what you already identified is the anti-Catholic bias that we have within majority Protestant countries specifically. Yeah. The anti-Catholic rhetoric is a major piece of this. But this isn't just a Catholic thing. It's a liturgical thing. And if you don't know what liturgical is that it's a style of ecclesiology in which everything is mapped out and planned out, and everybody that is within whatever liturgical context you're in all does the same thing every single week. So they have a calendar for which they read the Bible, what passages are being read. They have specific seasons of the year where they're focused in on certain aspects of the faith. They have certain feasts. They have all these different things that go on throughout the year. And it's very laid out and structured and how to go about living your faith and how to go about being a community.
Yeah. Shout out to pastors Brandon Knight and Will Rose, who were on Buddy Walk last year talking about the importance of Lent. And Pastor Will is going to be back on this year to talk about liturgy and the church calendar and all of that kind of stuff in this time where it's a pretty big deal for liturgical practices.
Oh, right. Yeah. The season is a big deal. I thought the discussion in general, though, has become a big deal because of, at least again, within our context here in the West, or probably better within a anglicized nations. So the UK, the US, Canada, Australia, in those contexts, the arguments about liturgy in general are very much politically based, because you have Anglicanism is the top line within the UK. It used to be top line within most of the colonies. Not anymore. You have other mainline liturgical churches and denominations throughout all these different things. All these different things that stayed liturgical. But you also have now a rise in both evangelicalism, specifically the brand that is white Christianity, and the apostolic churches that are not evangelical, but they are definitely not liturgical.
Right.
And both of them they all three butt heads around the idea of how should we actually structure our churches and structure our worship. Evangelicalism is very much about either freedom in structure, if we're talking fundamentalism, or freedom outright. The apostolic church is very much freedom within the spirit or freedom outright. And so the idea of us being boxed into all these things becomes very much about hierarchy and power and authority and tradition and all these buzzwords that we don't like. And so anything that falls within a liturgy setting immediately gets all heated. And well, if you do that, then you've either are now officially a part of some other sect of Christianity, or you have completely violated the faith.
Yeah, and that's one of the biggest things to take into consideration for anybody who's listening to this, who um if you've never heard us do Is It Pagan, we kind of fell into this, and it's
Accidentally on purpose.
accidentally on purpose, like the story of our ministries. But it's one of those things that, when you're talking about something like a holiday, or you're talking about something that has a tradition behind it, that has a way of grabbing things that never really were meant to belong to it. Other things get poured into it, so that way when you say things like something like Easter, right? What's the first thing you think of? Well, in the West, a lot of people, it's a giant anthropomorphized rabbit.
So wondering where you were going with that.
Yeah. For other people, you think of the Passion narrative, right? For you talk about things like Christmas. Some people think of a jolly fat dude in a red suit. Other people think of the nativity scene. But whichever direction you look at, it's important to clarify exactly what is being talked about, because then you can avoid the pitfall of pouring all of these meanings in, or all of this baggage in, without actually getting to the root of the actual period of time, or what these terms mean, or things like that. Because I think often we miss the big picture because we're so busy fighting about the individualized aspects of all of these things that don't actually belong there. That's not really what we're trying. Like, you're trying to have a different argument inside of something else, but we get lost there, and then next thing you know, we've never actually had the proper conversation because we're too busy arguing about other points along the way.
And that's part of the reason why we, specifically the two of us, are doing this, is because the almost irony of the people that have a problem with Lent or Advent or the Pentecost season, whatever it might be, is that the claim is that it's just tradition and that there's no biblical value to it whatsoever. The irony, though, is that those seasons are designed to actually keep the season Christocentric for us as believers.
And it took me a minute, just for the record, so that way you guys can understand. For those of you that are listening to this that may struggle, or may wonder what the point of tradition is and all of that, I wasn't always in a posture that was receptive to tradition, and I do think sometimes that there is room for overemphasizing the church fathers, or church tradition, or how it was done once before, or those kinds of things. I think there's a bridge too far. But just like talking about grace and mercy can provide its own bridge too far, or talking about love can do a bridge too far, or talking about wrath can go a bridge too far. Any of these things can go a bridge too far. But I've definitely seen the world where just because there's a tradition behind it, it gets thrown out.
Right.
Like, that's just for that group over there that recognizes that tradition, and I choose to stay focused on God and not on man's tradition, when in all actuality, this tradition, and I will call it a tradition, is designed to posture the individual in a means to be submissive to what this period of time means. what
And
the significance of this season of the year is building towards, what the main event, if you will, of this season is and is significant for, and all of those kinds of things, and helps keep you in a posture that has you in reverence to Jesus and focused on Jesus, not, and that's, yes, there is a world where you can take everything that we're talking about and get to a works-based theology, but that's not, but making those distinctions is what separates understanding what are we talking about versus what others are talking about.
And the key here is also understanding why we even do it. And so there's, within a liturgical system, everything is designed to, for those that listen to Kingdom on the Road, we just talked about this on Friday. The narrative of the story and its importance is why all the different pieces of a liturgical calendar are there. The narrative specifically that we have for Lent is the reason it's 40 days, the reason it's the 40 days prior, all these different things are intentional, because it's supposed to remind us of the 40 days and 40 nights that Jesus spent preparing for his ministry.
Yeah.
By sacrificing food, water, comfort, shade, all these different things, companionship, everything, and suffering, so that he might be able to go about his ministry that leads to him eventually suffering so that we don't have to anymore.
Right.
It is extremely Christocentric, biblically based, the reason why we do this.
Yeah.
As long as we actually remember why we're doing this.
That's the distinction. That's what you have to keep in mind, because at its core, the liturgical practice is a tool.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a tool that certain groups utilize, other groups don't. For me, the older I get, the more I can come to appreciate liturgical practices, though I do not specifically practice the liturgical calendar. Mm-hmm. There are aspects of it that I do embrace, because there is, for me, a beauty in a tradition that I know other saints who have come before me have engaged with. And there's a continuity to the human existence and us living the Christian life that I embrace, because it helps me understand that while my situation may have its own flavor, may have its own circumstance, I am not alone. And that's one thing that I want to convey to you guys listening is, if you are curious about this, do not think for a second that you have to now suddenly fully and completely embrace a tradition that utilizes the liturgical calendar in order to experiment with Lent. That's not what we're saying. We're explaining the most common context for finding somebody that would practice Lent and engage with this, including the feasts, including the full things, because in its full context, practicing Lent and observing Lent is not just, oh, I gave up something for the last 40 days and all of that. Nope, there are feasts involved. There are specific aspects involved if you're taking the full piece. And it's something that we need to get out of the habit of associating with one specific group, because I'll take, for instance, my on-ramp, and again, I shouted him out before. I was really smartened up to what all of this looks like by a senior pastor of a Lutheran church in North Carolina. I came to it by way of Lutheranism. By and large, you're going to find a lot of people who observe it by way, at least in the East Coast, by way of Roman Catholicism. I emphasize that for anybody who's not on the East Coast who is unaware that 9 times out of 10, when you're talking about Catholicism and you're blanket statementing Catholicism, by and large, you're generally talking about Roman Catholicism, and it matters. It really does matter when you're to make those distinctions.
You also have on these, I mean, the East Coast started as Anglican colonies. So, I mean, there again, you still have a liturgical background. But, you know, the bigger thing there is, like you said, you don't have to be liturgical in ecclesiology in order to understand the benefits of recognizing these sort of seasons throughout the year that are designed to help us grow as disciples.
Yeah.
That's the whole point of this. You know, one of the things that has caught people off guard is they know I've grown up Southern Baptist. They know I've trained within Quakerism and the Friends denomination. Neither of them are liturgical in any concept of liturgy. But whenever I have planned out series or Bible studies or full on sermons, when we are within certain seasons of the liturgical calendar, that was where the focus was on. We fully were doing Advent series, even as the youth group that I was leading was doing Advent stuff. The church that when I was a senior pastor, we had a Lenten series that was focused on the different aspects of Jesus' ministry. Yeah. We then also after Easter spent, the however many weeks it is of 40 days talking about the role of the Holy Spirit within the early church, preparing for Pentecost Sunday.
Right.
I'm not liturgical, never came from that, but the seasons are important because, like you said, it's about the community, the gathering of the saints, all being able to say we are all remembering the same thing that God has done for us. Again, we just talked about this on Kingdom on the Road on Friday in terms of the fact that the testimonies of the saints is how we are able to understand our own faith. Yeah. So why wouldn't we want to be in community with each other?
Right. And when you look at the liturgical calendar, it's not just made up. It's not just thrown together. It's based biblically in the seasons that come from the biblical context. And so this is where...
Well, you can argue, I guess, that the Advent season, Christmas season on the calendar doesn't necessarily line up, but that's a whole nother... We already did that episode.
Yeah, that's its own conversation. Anyway.
We did that episode already.
Yeah, so there are... And there's an emphasis here that I want to draw out, that it's two guys talking about this that don't necessarily come from a high church background or a liturgical background or anything like that, but still embrace these ideas because it's a yes and environment. When we're talking about these like traditions versus kind of writing your own script versus free form versus set standards, all of that kind of stuff, it's all a yes and. And so if we can get past what we pour into the topics of conversation, then we can get to actually looking at what does this look like to embrace this outside of just a Lutheran context, an Anglican context, a Catholic context, all of those kinds of things. Because there's so much richness to engaging with other perspectives and other traditions and other ways of doing things, when we can get over ourselves, when we can get over trying to make every single solitary thing a political conversation and every single solitary thing a power grab conversation and every single thing about trying to read an enemy into it. I'm going to say something spicy, and BWC, rock with me here for a second, because I don't think that this is largely going to land with you guys. Guys, I'm talking to the Misfit community here for a second. I am here enough that I feel like I have gained enough relational real estate to be able to say these things. And if not, my name is Joe, and I'm the guy who makes Andrew look like a moderate. So here we go. If you look at Lent, if you look at Lent and you look at Easter and you look at liturgy and you look at denominations and you look at groups or you look at different aspects of Christianity, and your first instinct is to look at this group as they are right and this group as they are wrong, this group as they are the enemy, and this group as they are the good guys. Guys, I ask you, have you read lately Matthew 5-7? Honestly, like, are we reading the same Jesus, guys? And I'm not saying that to throw a level of condemnation at you, because trust me, this comes from a pastor's heart. I love you and I want to see you understand the full and complete beauty of Jesus. But if we are so hung up on our political ideologies, if we are so hung up on what we are trying to prove, if we are so hung up on being the righteous moral high ground in the conversation, then we are going to get to the point of having to ask the question, is it pagan?
And the big thing with all of it is that if you are looking at the seasons, especially the season of Lent, with that kind of mindset, you haven't actually read the story that the season is leading up to. Because the entire story of Jesus is that he didn't consider his equality with God as something to be grasped, but laid it down willingly, taking the form of a servant.
Yep.
The entire story is about humility and sacrifice. Hence the entire idea of Lent.
Yeah.
If you are going to come into the story, and the other part of it is that if you actually understand what Lent is supposed to be about, which is a preparing for the sacrifice of the Savior, then you'll be able to recognize very quickly that, guess what? We all are celebrating the same source of our salvation.
Right. And if you
which is what the unity is supposed to be about.
Right. And if you don't celebrate Lent in all of this, like doing the actual practices of Lent, go in peace. It's not about everybody has to celebrate Lent. It's about, okay, if you're not doing that, then might I ask the question, is there something else that maybe you're doing that postures you to understanding the weight and significance of what we're leading to? And if not, then might I make a suggestion to take that to God, not in a, oh, you need to do better kind of way, but in like a engaging God in this conversation in a way that says, make me sensitive to this period of time. Make me sensitive in a posture that's fully receptive to the significance and the weight of what happened with Jesus. Make me sensitive to the reconciliation of the relationship that I get to have with you. Because that, regardless of whether or not you practice Lent, this is about demystifying Lent, to use the Kingdom on the Road language. This is about correcting some misconceptions about what Lent is and is not, and that it's not just for this group or that group. It's not just about giving up chocolate. It's not just about giving up soda. It's not just about giving up a thing. That it is about posturing yourself to understand what happened for you, that you do not stand as the righteous authority of God, that you were given free grace and mercy and love that was not earned or warranted or merited. That's the thing about grace. It's not fair.
And that's the key to why because again, we want to make sure people are hearing what we are saying and not hearing what we're not. This has actually very little to do with the liturgical idea of Lent. This is much more about the discipleship posture of remembering what Christ has done for us.
Yeah, but there's more than one road to get there, is our point.
Yes, and that's the key. Because this is something that I know, at least within certain sects of the African American denominations are historically black.
Mm-hmm.
They don't practice Lent, but not because they think it's pagan or not because it's Catholic, but because of the fact that the idea of remembering the suffering of Jesus and what he did to free us is something that is drilled into them as something that they do every day anyway. The process is already there. They don't need an entire season to do it because that is a daily part of the story of their faith.
Yeah.
We unfortunately don't always do that within more white Western cultures because of the fact that, just newsflash for people that don't know, the white church has not historically been one that has been known for humility and sacrifice.
Yeah. That's part of what always gets me laughing whenever I hear about how persecuted the white church is. Because your video didn't do well on YouTube, the system is holding you down.
I saw that exact argument yesterday from somebody that has over 1 million followers on YouTube.
Yeah, happens all the time. Literally all the time. Yeah. Hiccup in the road. Oh, the enemy is against us. The world is against. Okay, calm down. But I would honestly tell you, guys, if you ever want to see vibrancy, if you ever want to see, like, if it doesn't get your heart pumping and the blood flowing, then there is something wrong with you. Attend a black church. Seriously. I was ordained in a predominantly black church. A big part of my training came from that section of Western Christianity, because again, we got to talk about Western Christianity as its whole, not just white evangelicalism, though a lot of the time we are talking about white evangelicalism when we talk about the Western church, but that's not the sum total of it. But that's and I make that distinction because, like Andrew said, there's a beauty in the normative nature of the relationship with Jesus, the acknowledgement for what he did, the suffering that he endured, and the grace and love and mercy that was displayed through that. And that's all we're getting at. If you're Catholic, okay, you then just hopefully Lent is not just a routine for you. If you're listening to this and you're Lutheran, okay, if hopefully Lent is not just a routine for you. If you're listening to this and you're non-denominational, if you're listening to this in your Southern Baptist, if you're listening to this in your, I don't know, Pentecostal, Methodist, whatever, 87 other different flavors of ice cream, then just understand we're all on the same team, and we're all looking to accomplish the same thing. I highlight this particular aspect of Christianity in the West because, this is a group that by and large gets the gimmick.
And it's something, we're going back. We've used this, I think, almost every week in this misconception series, and it was not intentional, but maybe it should have been. Is we're back to Philippians 3, specifically 18 and 19. The idea of what the enemy of the cross actually is. Because for those that are from the BWC, this is something we used this the first time when we were talking about the idea of what it means to love our enemies and the fact that we don't have enemies, we have neighbors. And that the enemies of the cross were those that opposed what the cross represents, which is what's followed in verse 19. So this is what verse 19 is. So starting in 18 says, "For I have often told you, and now say again with tears, that many live as enemies of the cross of Christ. Their end is their destruction. Their God is their stomach. Their glory is in their shame. They are focused on earthly things." And then into verse 20, "But our citizenship is in heaven. We eagerly await our Savior from the Lord Jesus Christ. He will transform the body of our humble condition into the likeness of his glorious body by the power that enables him to subject everything to himself." The cross of Christ is one that is defined by victory, is defined by what we see in the Beatitudes as far as what it means to be full is to actually be hungry. It is about the fact that our shame is able to be traded for glory instead of it being our glory. It's the idea that we are not focused on earthly things, but focused on things that are above. And we understand that we await our actual citizenship in heaven, which is why we take a humble condition here on earth.
Right. And what it's not saying is it's not giving a blanket statement that anybody who believes differently than you or thinks differently than you is your enemy. It's not telling you that anybody who doesn't believe in God is a godless heathen that needs to be destroyed. This is not a blanket statement for hate. This is not a blanket statement for...
It's actually a blanket statement saying the opposite.
Exactly.
Because if you are reading that into this, then guess what? Unfortunately, now you have made yourself an enemy of the cross.
Yes. And unfortunately, we should never be, honestly, we should never be celebrating having an enemy.
Right.
We should never be celebrating a posture where we are in an adversarial position from somebody else. So
they're not our enemy. They're not our enemy. They're enemies of Jesus. They're not our enemy. They're enemies of Jesus. What we celebrate is the fact that they have seen Jesus in us. That is what we should be celebrating. And how they see Jesus in us is the fact that we don't see them as enemies. But what we have here in Philippians 3 related to the Lent side of it is the fact that we are focused on, in 40 days, we will see victory, not destruction.
Right. Yep.
Our God is not our stomach, which is why we can set aside the food that we want to fill us, or the sugary stuff, or whatever, the things that make us feel like we are human, we are able to set aside because that is not our God. Our God is the one that is going to be victorious. Yeah. We are able to recognize that those things that we like and are shameful for us, we can set aside because the glory of God covers us. And it's out of that humble condition that we know we will see victory and that we will be raised up to the kingdom. That is what Lent is supposed to be about. And so when we are actively condemning it,
right,
what are we actually condemning?
Right. So BWC, we're gonna bring a bit of our flavor here now to the Misfits. It was exactly 39 minutes before Joe started preaching about the kingdom. It's probably a record. The beautiful thing about the kingdom is that Jesus didn't create it. He didn't create the kingdom. He talked about it. He contextualized it. He gave a reference point for it. But he did not create it. The kingdom of God existed before Jesus was here, flesh and blood. And there's a beauty in that, because there is a perspective that we can have that means that it's not just a Jesus thing.
Mm-hmm.
And when we are talking about the gospel of the good news of the kingdom of God, that is not just a death, burial, and resurrection thing. That's much deeper. There is something real. There is something tangible. There is something elusive and spiritual. There is something rich and nuanced. There's something, all of these words, because I say some people may have just heard the record scratch when I said elusive. I mean that because there is something not yet to it. Mm-hmm. It's not just what is here. There is something not yet to come as well. And so we will not fully understand it on this side of the veil. But there's this responsibility and call to live in a way that brings life. And part of that is loving people. Part of that is loving on people regardless of situation and circumstance, position, political affiliation, socioeconomic status, color of skin, country of origin, whatever. It's all like, and I'm not, don't hear what I'm not saying. I'm not trying to whitewash all of that and say where you come from doesn't matter. I'm saying love unconditionally. And that, guys, that's the emphasis point here. Because if we are able to posture ourselves in receptivity to the realities of what was done for us, that allows us to be able to engage with the very heart and character of God and to bring the light of Jesus into the world. Guys, we do not create or build the kingdom. We pray for the ability to engage in it, to be able to get in the game. And that's it. And when we get in the game, guys, we are fulfilling the very tenets that Jesus laid out for us and showed in his actions and in his words and what he did and ultimately how he died.
And that's where that was part of what we talked about last week for Misfits with Trey in terms of why both Trey and I go Christus Victor in terms of our atonement theology is because the death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus was an act of loving God and loving neighbor and done in a way as an example of what we are called to do as well. So when we go to preach the gospel, if we are preaching the death, resurrection, or death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus, make sure that's in the right order, death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus, that means that we are going to see people as our neighbor. And it's because of our love for God that we want to see them as our neighbor. Not just that we're forced to, but that we want to.
Exactly. That's so baked into this whole thing. Yes, we've been talking about Lent But baked into this whole thing is, how do we engage? If we're talking about, is it pagan? How do we engage with this practice, with people who practice this practice? How do we engage with other denominations? How do we engage with other Christians? How do we engage with other people? Here's the thing. When we are called to love our neighbor, we are called to love on community. Now, that can be the immediate people around you. That could be the people in your life. That could be the place that you worship. That could be the place that you live. That could be a larger context. That could be people that you've never met before. But it's not something that we do for the sake of doing.
Mm-hmm.
It's something that we get to do because we respond to the call of Jesus. We respond to the heart of God, and we get to display the heart of God for people. Because here's the thing, whether you like it or not, whether you accept it or not, for somebody, you are the only picture of Christ that they will ever have in their life. For somebody, you are the first representation of Christ, or the most significant picture of a Christian in their life. And that, yes, there is a holy burden that comes with that. Yes, there are responsibilities of us, on us as Christians. Yes, I don't shy away from that, nor should you. But that's the beauty of the picture that I like to paint over on Buddy Walk. Is, imagine, if you will, that you are in a playground. Now, that playground has fences, right? On the other side of the fence, it's a highway. There's, I don't know, neighbors' yards, whatever. That you know that the perimeters of the playground, that's that fence line. You just know, don't go past that fence line. Okay, that's the rules. That's the conduct. You stay within the fence line. Now, imagine, if you will, that you are standing at that fence line and you are looking out at what you can't do on the other side of the fence line. Okay, yeah, no problem. Turn around. Look out on the playground.
Mm-hmm.
There's a whole playground of things that you get to do. Go play. Go play. Go have fun. Loving your neighbor doesn't have to be one size fits all. It doesn't have to look a certain way. You can use the specific giftings that you have, things that you enjoy doing, to bless and love on others. And that is the beauty of the Christian experience, and why we say we get to love on other people. So, to tie this back into the Lent conversation and the liturgical conversation, you may hear this and say, I have absolutely zero interest in following the liturgical calendar. And to that, I say, go in peace. You may look at this and say, oh no, I don't have any interest in engaging with Lent, with the season of Lent. And to that, I say, go in peace. But also, do not condemn your brothers and sisters who decide to engage with that.
Mm-hmm.
And also, at the very least, be authentic enough and have enough respect for the source material.
Right.
To understand why it exists, why people engage with it, and the purpose of it. So that way, then at least you understand that this is an on-ramp to posturing yourself in reverence for what happened and for what we celebrate in light of a post-Jesus experience.
Well, and I'm going to actually push it a little bit more. Mm-hmm. And for once being the one that's looking like the extremist here. Because I would say that if you are one that has never done Lent in the traditional sense,
mm-hmm.
ask yourself why. And then
good.
Listen to what I'm about to say as far as why you should start. because here's where we're going with it. So what you were just talking about is a preview for Misfits listeners, and Buddy Walk, stay with us next week and you can get this conversation as well, of the conversation that I've been waiting to have for a while to actually articulate stuff with Dr. Hudson. Because part of what we're talking about is the difference between what it means to be a Christian, what it means to be a Christian, and what it means to be a Christian. Because you have the word as an adjective, you have the word as a noun, and you have the word as a lifestyle, as a culture. And what are the differences between? And one of the things that I finally figured out how to articulate after talking with him is the fact that a lot of where the problems come in, where the extreme political disunity comes into the church as a body, is that we confuse the call of the church and the call of the believer. We have them flip-flopped. The call of the believer is much larger than the call of the church. Yeah. Lent, in the way that most people think of it and most people make accusations about it, is a church call. It's the calendar. It's a time of year. It's on the calendar for a reason.
Yeah.
And that is what people don't like. But what they actually are making statements about and accusing is the call of Lent for the individual, which is an act of discipleship because it's a heart posture. It's a humbleness and a remembering of what God has done and what he has called me to do daily, not seasonally, daily. We are called to take up our cross daily. We are called to die to ourselves daily. We are called to consider all people as more important than ourselves. We are called to consider all other people's interests as more important than our own.
Yeah.
It's something where we as individuals should be embracing the attitude of Jesus that we see in the scriptures, whether it's Matthew 4, which is where the idea of 40 days comes from, or whether it's Matthew 28, where he's on the cross already. These are the postures that we are supposed to be having daily. And so if for 40 days you think it's impossible to do that and it's all fake and it's all political or it's all showmanship or it's all tradition or whatever, got to question your heart posture the other 320 some days of the year. Yeah. Because we're called to that posture all the time. And the reason the holy discontent is on the screen is because what Joe was describing is exactly what we are saying, is that when we finally recognize that this heart posture is the call of discipleship, not doing it makes us uncomfortable.
Yeah.
We are discontented when we are unable to do what we have been called to do, to whatever that looks like, whether it's to your family or to your community or to your coworkers or to the guy on the street or to your church or whatever it might be. When we cannot do what God has called us to do, it should make us way more uncomfortable than having to give up something for 40 days.
Right. Yep. That's it. You know, it's one of those things that if we shed the things that we pour into it, it becomes far more simplistic.
Right. It's not a very simple thing.
This is not overly complicated. That's why part of this conversation has to be about the gospel and what is the gospel and death, burial, and resurrection and all of those kinds of things, because this is kind of core stuff. Like this is baked into right at the heart of what Christianity is, and why we celebrate, or why the season is significant, and all of those kinds of things. And if we don't try to read a specific tradition into it, if we don't try and read a political position into it, or buzzwords into it, or something along those lines, then suddenly we are just left with what? A heart posture. That's all. That's all. And if we can understand that there is continuity to the scriptures, if we can understand that there is continuity to God, that his heart has always been for his people, that he has always been willing to give humanity another chance, that he has always been willing to embrace his creation, and that his preferred will is that no man shall perish, then that should, if we are seeking to follow Jesus, to live like him, to be transformed into his likeness, to embrace the Father, to have relationship. And that's not my job to sit here and tell you whether or not you're doing that. That's not my job. If you struggle with these things, if you struggle with looking at people as enemies, if you struggle at looking at this as a political thing, if you struggle with thinking that Christians should be Republican, that Christians should be Democratic, that Christians should be this, that Christians should be that, or look like this, or practice like this, or any of those things, if you have superimposed anything, then my biggest suggestion is to authentically engage God and ask, why have I superseded this? Why have I superimposed this into my belief system? Why do I think that Christians should be this, that, or the other? Or why do I think that this group of people is my enemy? And start to ask questions, because some talking head on the internet is not going to be the catalyst that says, "Oop, now I think differently."
Unless it's me, that's
the same Holy Spirit that if you've believed, the scriptures are simple. Now again, right. in the words of the great philosopher Ant, for context, watch Kingdom on the Road. A Christian does not mean that you are sinless. It means that you sin less.
Well,
we are not sinless beings. Good.
I was going to say, one way, if especially what he just described is what you struggle with, that you have become convicted of, whether it's through stuff we've talked about, whether it's stuff you're seeing, whether it's stuff you're seeing in yourself, whatever it might be. The idea of how you view other people, whether it's you view them as enemies, whether you view them as lesser than, whether you view them as something where it's greater than in a way of idolization, instead of just viewing them as somebody that you should be serving, rather than giving something up, because that is much harder to do. Take something on for the season and actually dive into what the Imago Dei actually is.
Yeah.
Make it a challenge to view people from that lens for 40 days. And what you'll find is, in doing that, you're going to give up the old way. Because it's not actually about what you're giving up. If it's about what you're giving up, then at that point, you're already identifying that thing is an idol.
Right.
And it should be given up more than 40 days of the year. It's about the way that you are allowing your heart to be postured. In many ways, Lent is a preparation for a worship service.
Yep.
Ultimately, within a Catholic tradition, within an Orthodox tradition, it literally is preparation for the feast.
Yeah.
It's for the celebration of Easter Mass. That is what Lent is about. But again, take away the ecclesiological problems that you have with whatever tradition you associate with this, and look at it again as what are we actually called to as believers, which is to love God and love people. And both of those things are what we see Christ do on the cross. And we know that Christ took the time to prepare himself for that. So give yourself a break of not being perfect already. And start tomorrow. If you're listening to this day of release, tomorrow would be is Ash Wednesday, which is the official start of Lent. Mm-hmm. Give yourself a chance to actually let the Spirit go about the renewal of your mind.
Yeah. That's and that's the thing, guys. Like, seek in what you will find. God has always promised to engage his people. So as you engage with this, you're going to find that you are going to get what you ask for if you ask for it. So then ask for it. If you are convicted about the way that you view other people, okay, then talk to God about it. Engage God about it. And be purposeful. Because that intentionality matters. The intentionality of how you engage people and how you engage this practice and how you engage Lent. You can engage Lent and give up coffee for 40 days and that's it. And it means nothing. And you do all of the practices, and because that's what you do, you can engage with Lent or any of the liturgical calendar and it means jack all.
Mm-hmm.
But it comes down to the posture in which you engage with the practice, the principle, the ideology, whatever.
And that is the key to the difference between what he said and what we talked about the first time that Joe was on Misfits, is that the idea of if you seek, you will find, and if you ask God, he'll give it to you, is not a prosperity theology standpoint. Because what Joe is talking about here is that if you are seeking what God has already called you to, and are asking for him to create in you a new heart, to renew your mind, he's going to do it, because that is what he has already told us, that if we do this, that it will be the response. Yep. That he who started the good work in you will see it through to full completion. Yep. That is what we are talking about. That is what Lent is supposed to be about, is another opportunity for us to be intentional about looking at ourselves and seeing what over the next 40 days specifically we want to focus on, so that once we celebrate the fact that Christ has already declared himself victorious, we can then go the rest of the year practicing that. That is what this is about. It's not some pagan practice. It's not some traditionalist, forcing upon things to make restaurants serve good fish for once. It is about a heart posture so that we are prepared to go out into the world, just like we are called to do immediately after Christ has risen. Yep. That's what the narrative of the story dictates. And that is what the experience of the church for thousands of years has been as well.
That's it.
That is it. So, Misfit-wise, we still have 2 more episodes, schedules permitting. 2 more episodes in season 3. Dr. Hudson, and I almost called him Dr. Bowman again, and he loves it when I do it, but he's not a doctor. So, Dr. Hudson and Joel Bowman, 2 different episodes, 2 different discussions related to a lot of what we were just talking about as far as the misconceptions of ecclesiology, missiology, and worldviews, as far as what we actually are supposed to do with all those things. So that's coming up. If nothing else, those episodes are cathartic for me, because I've been trying to articulate those things for years and have not been able to, and it took 2 people that are way smarter than me to be able to get me to actually get it out. Still may not be still may not actually be in a way that people can understand, but I feel better about it. So if you want to find out about all of that, go to ministrymisfits.com. You can stay up to date with everything there. The guest portals are also updated as far as with everything, including Pastor Trey's portal is up, so you can find his book and you can find his podcast and all that good stuff. Buddy Walk Community, Joe's stuff is all up here as well. So if you need to find a link and you don't remember what his website is, just come over to Misfits and go to his guest page, and you'll find all of it right there, including all 18,000 of his shows. The Bible study is supposed to be coming up, assuming, again, schedules will allow it. So if you have no idea what I'm talking about, if you go to patreon.com/Ministry Misfits and sign up at any of the different levels, we do Bible studies there, just short videos explaining some different things from different passages and then asking questions like we were asking you today. This last year, we went through the book of Galatians, and it's all on there. So you can find that at any of the different levels. This year, we're going to be walking through the book of Daniel. And doing all that good stuff. So stay tuned for all that. You can find that patreon.com/Ministry Misfits. Joe, what's going on over with Buddy Walk?
So we just wrapped up season 3 for such a time as this, and we kicked off season 4 this past week with the Acts Project, kind of a prelude where we are going to be going into the book of Acts, and we are going to be exploring what it means to be a community of God and exploring different contexts, different things for that, and diving into some of the foundational stuff that dictates how I view community and church and all of that good stuff. We also are in the midst of our walk through the Old Testament over on Kingdom on the Road. We are demystifying the Old Testament. We just wrapped up the Exodus of the Israelites from Egypt, and we'll be continuing into the book of Exodus going forward. Every Saturday, for those of you that are into this style of conversation, more free-form conversation about matters that are relevant to our everyday lives, you can find over on the Kingdom on the Road YouTube channel, Let It Rip, that is hosted by a member of our team, Pastor TC, where we cut it up about different specific issues. At time that this will be released, that you guys will be hearing it, we'll have just gone through our conversation about race in the church and racial equality and all of that as we continue on through our series covering social justice and what that means.
Yeah, and so if you want to find out about Kingdom on the Road, Misfits, if you go to the Ministry Misfits website under the videos tab, you will find a place where all of the Kingdom on the Road stuff is at. You also can actually watch the live stream Friday mornings at 9:30 there on the website, assuming that I remembered to update it on Thursday. But you'll also be able to find the full catalog of everything there. Let It Rip, like he said, Kingdom on the Road, YouTube, as well as Joe's Facebook page. You also should, if I remember to do it, you should be able to catch all that on the Misfits channels that you would find the Kingdom on the Road stuff. So Twitter, the Facebook page, and our YouTube, it should all be there. I'm also trying to get them all cataloged into playlists for those that want to go back and watch old episodes as well. You can do that. So this was It Pagan. This was Misfits. This was Buddy Walk with Jesus. This was kind of sort of Kingdom on the Road in a way as well, because we were demystifying everything. It's just a big party in here. So those of you that want to catch up on all the stuff we've been doing with this series, you can go check back in the Ministry Misfits archives as far as the past 4 or 5 episodes, starting with appearance by our good friend Joe here, as well as Ant talking about pastors, and then we were talking about enemies, and then we talked about wisdom and Lent, and now we're going into missiology and all that good stuff. So remember two things: that all of you are prayed for and all of you are loved deeply, and we will see you all next week.
The Ministry Misfits podcast is a production of Ministry Misfit Media in association with Overwhelming Victory. Dr. Greg Linville and Andrew Fouts are our executive producers, and Brandon Simmons is associate producer. The Ministry Misfits theme song is written and produced by J.D. Laird and Laird Creative Agency. If you'd like to get in touch with us, you can email us at ministrymisfitmedia@gmail.com or by following @ministrymisfit on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. You can also visit our website at www.ministrymisfits.com or through bio.link/ministrymisfits. If you would like to support Ministry Misfits, you can become a patron by going to patreon.com/ministrymisfits.